Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. What is this? UnSpun episode number 132. We are doing the roots of Antinomian music tonight with Dr. Hans Utter. Hans, welcome back.
Hey, Jan, it's great to see you. Yeah,
We
great to be back.
had a lot of material last week. We didn't have chance to cover it all. This was going to be sort of a part two, but it's sort of not. Also, it's under a totally different title. So anyway, welcome to the show. I suppose we have a lot of material to cover. We always do, so we should probably just dig in. Huh? Oh, and I should say thanks for all the support and donations. And my heart goes out to my sister and her family and everybody up in Northern California who lost their homes in the fire. It's been a rough week for her family and and lots of other people's families. So it hit close to home this time, and I've been evacuated from here. This is a wood cabin in the mountains, and I've been evacuated from here before. In 2003, we were evacuated for a week from the old fire, which at the time was the largest fire in California or U.S. history. But anyway, let's dig in and let's hit the ground running here.
All right, Jan, that's great. My mind just went blank. I totally forgot what the show was about. I'm just kidding. Don't worry. It's been a long day. And last show, I had been sick for about 2 weeks, and I realized that it seemed like I just done like a 8-ball or something. So that wasn't the case. I actually was under the weather. Oh yeah, that's what I do, Jan. Before I go on UnSpun, I go.
You get spun. You get spun before you go on UnSpun.
Ironically enough, this house that I live in, right, it was actually owned by a guy that ran a drug cartel, Mexican guy, and he had these front grocery stores, right? And but then the whole like the studio I'm in now, the entire thing was mirrors, wall to ceiling everywhere. So I've got a lot of mirrors. Anybody want some mirrors? I'm not sure why I brought that up, but there you go. All right.
TMI, Hans, blame the drug cartel guy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. His spirit.
Yeah.
Is watching me.
Yeah.
Just like Alice Cooper. Now, the fact was that I'm going to be. This is sort of the basis, right, for
Alice
what I was.
Cooper's ritual sacrifice of the goyim with the chicken.
Yeah. Well, no, this is. I wanted to provide a little more of a scientific basis and culturally sound, as well as looking at actually mechanisms for this stuff. So my examples this week, I'm going to be looking at a lot of classical music, avant-garde, primarily, solely actually. And I just didn't want to listen to any more Alice Cooper. I'm a boy and I'm a man. I mean, that line, it actually got stuck in my head after that show. It was like the ghost of Alice Cooper cursing me. It wouldn't stop. I mean, I'm
sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it was.
So did you start getting confused if you were a boy or a man?
No, I never really had that. I never really had that thought. Never came in my mind. Like I just thought in my life, I never thought I'm a boy, but I'm a man. It just didn't. This thing is kind of interesting. I'm just gonna jump ahead. Musicogenic epilepsy. It's a phenomenon, right? Where people hear certain songs. They actually they have epileptic seizures. They have like intense anxiety. And it's usually like one single song. And people have actually committed suicide. They've actually murdered people from this disorder. But only, at least there's like 76 cases, maybe, 80 or 90. So, but I felt like when I was looking into that, I said, man, Alice, I love you, guy. Let's hang out. Let's hang out and golf. We can go golfing and talk about this stuff. But yeah, and by the way, I do appreciate support. I do put a lot of time in, coming up with this stuff.
Give out your address and email so people can throw you some donations. And, throw up some super chats for me too, folks, please.
It's hansutter@hotmail.com. It's my name. And you can reach me at Folsom Prison. Just... All right.
It's Northern California.
Yeah. I've been there. Well, I haven't been there. I've seen it from the outside, man, not from the inside. Okay, not yet. Okay, so let's just get into it. Antinomian, what does that mean? I'm sure people are familiar with that. If you're not familiar with it, it's a term that means a type of a movement, a process, can be a religious process, a cultural process. It's generally it's a movement, right? You don't have a single person that's antinomian. For example, the Burning Man could be described in a certain way as antinomian festival, even though kind of isn't, but it basically means disrupting, the norms, and also, in a sense, there's an idea of destabilizing the order in whatever particular field that is. And in this case, we're going to look a little more detail about music. It's a little more dense tonight. I don't know why. I like to hurt myself, but so look into how this
and it's going to be under an hour too.
is it.
Oh no,
Okay.
I'm just just psyching the audience out.
I was, and I
Yeah.
was, I'm trying not to talk so fast. I heard the last show back. I'm like, man, that's why I made that joke in the beginning. It's like I was really talking fast, and I thought I was talking quite slowly because I was so sick. But I guess that was the quadruple espresso that I had before the show. But so, anyways, so we look at, first of all, we had the examples last week, right? So this is sort of a backstory as well as supporting arguments, as well as expanding the picture in a much more broad way. One thing about both Mr. Alice Cooper and the music I'll be talking about tonight, except for, by the way, I have a concert tomorrow, so I may play some sitar before I start doing the music examples, just because I feel like it, but also I want to, I have to practice.
We get the personal upfront front row concert here, huh?
Well, it's not gonna. I mean, I'm gonna be holding the sitar like this and try not to make any
Right.
rock star faces.
Yeah. Well,
But
you don't want to look like Alice Cooper now.
no, I don't. There's somebody that.
Do you sacrifice chickens before the show to mock the Goyim?
No, I don't. I have yet to do that. I it just reminded me of this guy who was, he just, I don't know if he was a critic. I did this concert. He's like, he said, do you study acting? He's like, no. He's like, I really understood the music through your facial expressions. I realized you work so hard to make those expressions. I'm like, dude, I'm just playing the music. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if that was like a knife in the back from the critic, but anyways, let's start with a quote from.
It sounds like when my mom used to talk about the faces I would make when I was a little boy when I was coloring.
When you were coloring,
yeah,
you'd have been an artist, man.
Yeah,
you're the next Pablo Picasso. All right. So this is a quote from Paul Henry Lang, musicologist, scholar, writing, sort of in the early 20th century. Quote: "New life could be infused into the music of this rapidly disintegrating world only by an even more nervous, sophisticated, and surcharged emphasis on the already overtaxed elements of effort and technique. Experiment then became the final aim." Okay. And this is talking about, we'll be looking into, we talk about antinomian music. Alice Cooper, to be honest, at least on a level of music, is I'll show basically how the same thing with the atonal music, avant-garde, even the painting, modernism happening at the same time. It came out of nowhere as a fully formed entity, so to speak. I'll talk about the six, these groups of composers in Paris. But just like Alice Cooper, it was sort of forced upon people. And in fact, it was governmentally mandated during the Cold War, the music I'll be talking about. So you say, why? Why would that happen? And it's not a popularity contest, but we'll see that, there's a disturbing element, right? We say antinomian element that's occurring.
We've gone into antinomianism before, but we should probably define what antinomian is, I think. And it's a very important topic. In fact, I define it in my article in Theogens, What's in a Name, because Uh, Professor Marlene Dobkin de Rios talks about it, and using psychedelics. So, just really quickly, it means of or relating to the view that Christians are released by grace from the obligation of observing the moral law. In other words, you shouldn't bother living in truth. Just by grace, just by accepting Jesus, you don't have to actually change any behavior or anything. And we see a lot of the megachurch preachers promoting this idea. All you have to do is accept Christ, but you don't have to actually change any behavior. And in this case, it's, antinomian means against the law, really. And so it's used, like Anna Hutchinson from the Massachusetts Bay Colony in the 1600s. She and I think it was John Cotton who were originally the big promoters of antinomianism, and they promote her and John Cotton as big cultural heroes and icons. Anne Hutchinson went on to found the state of Rhode Island, but she was a rogue. She was thrown out, even by the Jewish Puritans. She was thrown out of Salem. And so, what they did was they would create pseudo forms of Christianity like Puritanism, but the antinomianism was a whole philosophy that they developed against Christianity while putting on a veneer of Christianity at the same time. But it was really there to undermine the Christianity as far as living in truth or logos. So it was really there to to strip that away and to create moral relativism and to promote the very ideas that we see being promoted out in the society today by the CIA and everything we've exposed over, the last many years.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for that, Jan. I did look up the definition myself. And you can look at it as overthrowing the moral order, but it is this idea of rules, regulations, structures, even as we'll see, with tonality, with naturally arising harmonic frequencies, and deliberately violating that, going against that on purpose. That is in a different way. And,
it's the
in
same
some ways,
thing in a different application.
Yeah. And maybe even sort of a deeper application. But I just want to read a few quotes here just to keep the rock thing going before I dive into the heady world of Stockhausen and Varese. But so this is Alice Cooper. Quote, "When the Beatles walked into a room, everybody wanted to be near them. I always said, when Alice Cooper walks into the room, I want everyone to take a step backwards. So we created this villainous character. I went to see Barbarella, the Black Queen. She had all the leather and switchblades coming out of her hands. I went, oh, that's what Alice should be like. There should be a real dangerous sleekness to him. Then I saw Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, where there was this old woman trying to look like she's 5 years old again with smeared makeup and all the wrinkles. And I said, that's Alice too. All right. So there we go. There's Alice, which of course, again, the band was not, this is also backtracking in the sense the band itself was all called the Alice Cooper Group until he put everyone else out to pasture. Okay, so I'm just reading some quotes here. I got all these sources for the last week. So, and this is Bobby Liebling, these are all like heavy metal guys. I was practicing all kinds of black arts and occultism and Satanism. And I was a member of the Satanic Church in the DC area. I did a lot of incantations and was in an actual coven. One night I was at a friend's house. We always kept a couple copies of Anton LaVey's Satanic Bible around and books on witchcraft and spells and the occult. It was July 4th and we were completely sober. We were sitting in the basement and reading from the Satanic Bible. And all of a sudden I started to blow a little fog out of my mouth. I was into the reading and hadn't noticed that the room had gotten ice cold. All the pipes in the entire basement formed droplets of water and became icicles. The basement windows were covered with frost and the entire room was about 25 degrees. And this was a matter of 10 to 20 minutes. I got scared. And then he said, actually, Bobby said after that, he quit being a Satanist. Okay, but there's another quote. This is the guy from the band. This is Joey Haslander from Pentagram and Raven. Bobby conjured up something that scared him to death, and he ran out of the house and never came back. Of course, you're supposed to close those doors, but they never did. And I think that's part of why he has had so many problems in his life with drug addiction and a lack of financial success. I really believe that because something like that happened to me. I found these tarot cards dating back to the Salem witch trials that were at a house in New York where we lived with Raven. They were coated in human blood. They were horrifying. I took about 10 of them. They almost destroyed my life. A spirit was found in 2 of these cards, and the person who was bound to them had invoked demons and was probably responsible for the Salem witch hysteria. He made people go nuts by sending cursed objects out to them. It caused an incredible poltergeist outbreak in my house, and I had to move. Okay, and it goes, he's talking about Salem. Okay, kind of interesting. So this guy was Cliff Burton was killed. He says Cliff Burton from Metallica was killed because of these cursed tarot cards. And then I'll just read one last quote here. This is just random crap, but this is Zach Wilde from played with Ozzy Osbourne, Black Label Society. Zach Wilde. When we were recording the album Osmosis in 1995, we did a batch of it in New York. There was an occult bookstore called The Magical Child, and they had everything in there about Wicca, Catholicism, Satanism, the whole yards. I was getting some Aleister Crowley stuff because Jimmy Page owned the castle. That's Jimmy Page's, of course, famous. He bought Aleister Crowley's house, and the other guys were into him. I'm like, what's the skinny on this guy? I'm buying books as if it were a book report. I go to get this poster of Aleister Crowley, and I said, how much for the poster? The guy looked at me deadpan and says, $6.66. I put $7 down and said, keep the goddamn change. Ozzy asked me, Zach, who's the guy up on the wall? And he goes, Zach, who the fuck is he? I said, I'll try to swear. I don't effing know. You've been singing about him for the last 20 years. He's like, well, who the fuck is it? Oz, it's Aleister Crowley. Oz says, oh, that's what that bald-headed cunt looks like. That's a great line. So supposedly, I don't know, maybe it wasn't that funny, but so basically, Ozzy had never seen a picture of Aleister Crowley, which he admitted he was pronouncing wrong. So everyone says Crowley. That's from Ozzy Osbourne. So I don't know. That's just, take from that what you want or what you don't want to. Obviously, these are heavy metal artists and performers. But there's another quote, though, that from Crosby, David Crosby, and he says that, what we're doing is we're going to capture the children's minds and take them away forever from their families and their parents. So it's there. You've got this element, some of it, obviously a little bit of show, like Ozzy and all this stuff. And then, who knows, true or not. But if you want to chime in there, Jan, before I go into
I was just thinking they rolled out Dr. Jerry Brown, who did the book, The Psychedelic Gospels, which is a professorial hit piece against me. But to help for Dr. Jerry Brown to, and this guy's, his book is just a total hit piece against me, and I should totally just expose the guy. I've done a show exposing a lot of what he did, but they brought on David Crosby to help him promote the book against me.
Wow. Well, that's some star power, Jan. I mean, at least they didn't bring out Alice Cooper, man. At least a little more legitimacy, man.
Yeah.
David Crosby, and the guy actually could sing. He wasn't a blithering buffoon like the orca or the sea lion can sing better than that guy. Okay, I'm not going to imitate a sea lion, but so okay. Well, back to the meat here. Maybe we'll just BS, but I wanted to get into some of the neuroscience behind how this stuff actually can affect you or certain things, and a little bit how this works and tie this into a larger contextual model of some of the reasons for these types of quote unquote antinomian outbreaks. So familiar with the reticular activating system? Familiar with that?
Particular what system?
Reticular activating system.
No, go ahead and explain
Okay,
that.
so
Just
yeah,
for the audience anyway.
well, no, it's not. Shit. I thought you knew what it was. Okay, yeah.
We probably covered it before.
I'm
I
just
don't
kidding.
know.
I'm just kidding, man. So reticular activating system is part of our brains or our makeup, right? That brings together our senses and determines what we see as real, how we actually interact with the world in terms of like what is available to us, what is not available, and it either allows certain types of information or shuts them down. Okay, and this is one of the ways that when you get this modulated or modified, right, and that's one of the things that that relates to what some of the stuff about the music. Not saying that it's like that the chicken is going to come bite you, but so it's connected, it's with the brain. I won't get into all the details, but it connects with not only our waking and sleeping, but also with our endocrine system, our various types of glandular stuff, which is quite important. Okay, so we're looking at cardiovascular control, pain modulation, sleep and consciousness, habituation. Okay, that's where certain types of things you learn to ignore types of stimuli. You also learn to focus on others, and then somatic motor control related to moving, auditory, perception. But really, in a sense, it really is the one part of our brain, so to speak, that affects our reality, right? We're talking about dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin, histamine, acetylcholine, glutamate, etc. And so this is a bit of, we talk about some of the effects. I'm going to look at some of the literature and see how this stuff, you could say, could be injected and what may or may not be going on here. But anyways, you'll learn about something, or I will. So first I'll talk a bit about, this is related to the theory or the science sort of embodied cognition, right? And this is how we relate our environment with our senses, how we function with the connection between our sensory inputs, our motor system, and then also our situatedness, right? How we are in the environment, how we see ourselves in the environment, how we model it or map it in our minds, but then also, of course, how the environment is. For example, if there's a tiger running at you, that's going to affect, more than just if you're tripping and the walls start to melt, right? A little different. But and this is called the temporal information. So temporal information, this sets our sense of time, how fast time flows, how we see ourselves in time, but it's also relating all these different types of stimulus and linking them and connecting them, right? But it allows you to guide your actions, allows you to function in the local situation, right? So that it's a process of your mind itself uses the environment. It's called also offloading of cognition. So you can use the external environment for processes, neurological processes, et cetera. But we have our arousal attention system, again, reticular activating system. And then we go all the way into sensory transmissions, the hippocampus, our memories, episodic memories, our limbic system, and our emotions and behavior. So all of these are tied together, and they're also tied in with our motor system, with our limb movement and things like that. So we'll talk a little bit about rhythm as that goes, right? And then because of that, we get our sense of what I call one we call situatedness. And that is where you are linked with your social culture environment, right? So you're this base level of mental processes, right? Again, reticular activating system, it relates to arousal, but awareness, but also really, it also determines what we see, what we don't see around us, how we interpret it, okay? And then this, this entire linkage with our embodied sort of cognition. And I'll just give you an example. Okay, this is a study, Hein and Hein, 1958, difference between sensory and motor kittens. So the kittens were raised in a dark environment and exposed to light only under controlled conditions. The first group of animals was allowed to move around normally, but each of them had to pull around a cart in which wrote a member of the second group. Sounds like a fun experiment, right? The two groups thus shared nearly identical visual experiences, but one group experienced the world actively and the other passively. Upon release in a few weeks, the first group of kittens behaved normally, but the second group behaved as if blind, bumping into objects and falling over edges. Hence, objects in the world were apprehended not simply by visual extraction of features, but rather by the visual guidance of action. Okay. Let me just break that down a bit, right? So you have these kittens. One group of kittens is riding around in these carts, right? They're not actually walking, or they're not walking much, right? They're being moved around. They're getting the stimulation coming into them from outside. They're not actually engaged with the world, right? So and then of course they have limited light conditions. The other group, they were blind, not because of they had the same exposure to light that the moving group did, but because of that, their visual system was impaired, right? So now we look at, okay, we'll just leave that there unless you want to go further into that. So this is just keep this stuff in mind. I know we can kind of keep going in a lot of different ways, but so what we're looking at though is that not only who we see, a lot of we say who we are. I mean, so much of this, if you start tweaking some of these systems, and then you can push someone almost like the kittens that think they're blind, right? You could push people into this space where they no longer are able to see the world around them, but are in a sense, atrophied, and they're caught up in these loops. And so
the Pokemon world we exposed last year, essentially, but in day-to-day life and expanded to a greater level.
Yeah, but I think that, there is a certain extent, right? Well, I don't want to extrapolate too much from that information, but it's let's just move a little bit into Huxley. I just said that people wanted to drink. I just said it. It had nothing to do with what I'm going to say now. Okay.
Well, at least you said it first, other than me, so it's not my fault.
Yeah. So we go back, and this is green tea, by the way, unfortunately, or fortunately, that's good for me. Okay, so now we'll talk a little bit about
water, not vodka.
I don't believe you. I don't believe you. So next thing I'm going to read a little bit here. I've got this is Bateson and Mead, right? So we're talking about the development of cybernetic systems, through the Macy conferences. And of course, you have a huge array of material on Bateson, but this is Bateson in his sort of white coat, talking, interviewed by Stuart Brand, which is quite interesting. I'll try not to read all of that. But so Bateson, that was another story. That's before Richardson, and even way before feedback. Already in Naveen, there's a statement that complementary schismogenesis neutralizes symmetrical and vice versa. If you get into too long a contrast between the bosses and the workers, which is complementary schismogenesis, you put them all out on the cricket field and make them play cricket, which puts them in a symmetrical situation. And it doesn't matter who wins the game of cricket, Okay. Typical Bateson, totally arcane statement with lots of weird encoded stuff. Go ahead.
Oh, somebody was asking if they could get keywords during the show so that they could just do research to follow along more on some of the topics. I thought that was a good idea.
Yeah. Maybe I can see if I could go to the. Should I go to YouTube or something, or should I just text you and you?
Yeah, you can go to YouTube if you want. Just make sure you have it muted when you pull it up. Otherwise, it'll. Did you get the link for the show?
No, I just got the I got the
all right, I'll email it to you. Just keep going and I'll send it to you here in a second.
Okay, great. All right. So there's different teams. Well, so we want to look at a little bit into cybernetics, right? And I probably won't go through all this material because I like reading what they actually say. Instead, I can interpret it for you, but I think it's also good to grapple. Again, like Bateson, he throws a lot of stuff in there. But cybernetics is based on this. The base idea of cybernetics goes back to the governor, right, of the steam engine. So when you have a steam engine and they install this mechanical device It's called the governor. This represented a type of system that was a self-sustaining system, later used, for the development of guided missile systems. And then it became part of the Macy conferences, and in fact was the core of the Macy conferences, even though the first conference was more about hypnosis, in different words. So schismogenesis is a term. So you have these cybernetic systems or loops. So negative feedback in a cybernetic system enables you to correct course, to break the loop. And positive feedback keeps you inside that loop. So notice positive thinking, positive, negative. And a lot of the positive thinking movement and self-esteem, et cetera, came directly out of cybernetics, but they neglect to tell you that in cybernetics, negative feedback means you are able to get out of the cybernetic loop system, and positive feedback means it's going to continue and intensify. So schismogenesis is a term that Bateson came up with to describe individual, family, societal, culturally wide processes of people being caught in a self-reinforcing feedback loop with different positions, antagonistic, but they're actually, as they battle each other, they are trapped more and more they are, the loop itself has this autonomy. It becomes almost like a type of autonomous system that it continually increases energy, and actually then all feedback just makes that loop stronger. Here's an example. He talks about husband and wife, and things like that, but he mentions bosses and workers. Okay. And then this is Mead. I remember Robert Merton saying once that there wasn't a person in the country who was thinking hard about problems who didn't have a folder mark somewhere like circular systems. Horney's book, The Neurotic Personality of Our Times, that's Karen Horney, the psychologist, discusses the vicious circle and intervention in the circle and the effective intervention. Milton's paper on the girl with migraines, headaches, okay, then it just goes on. So this is the idea. This neurotic personality is a type of one of these cybernetic systems. Okay. So again, it's cybernetics. Macy conferences started out in the beginning. Look up Norbert Wiener, God and Gollum. I won't go into all that, but the transhumanism was embedded in the very beginning to create machines. If the machines can reproduce themselves, then have they not become like God, or are they Gollum, or who's the God? Okay. But these guys are pretty weird. Okay, and this is just lead a little bit more here.
Yeah, and actually the Gollum thing is what influences the whole Frankenstein character by Mary Shelley into transhumanism as well, which of course is cybernetics, is directly tied to transhumanism.
As well as cyberspace, as well as the entire information computer science stuff. A lot of that came out of that too. But okay, this is Stuart Brand, Mr. Whole Earth, Mr. Hippie, Mr. Happy Hippie.
Margaret basically launched the psychedelic revolution as well.
Yeah. So, Margaret, what was your perception at the time of the early Macy meetings as to what was going on? The thing that cybernetics made the most difference to me, aside from all the things in the social organization field, was the interaction between mother and child. There had been too much emphasis that there were temperamental differences among children, so that you respond differently to a hyperactive baby than you did a quiet baby. But to the extent to which there was a system in which the mother was dependent on what the child had learned as a stimulus for the next position wasn't articulated until we got the cybernetics conferences going. So they're talking about circuits between mother and child, input-output events. So the bigger circuits, and then the engineers who take place in that circuit. So mother and child, a lot of this stuff was based on looking at communication between mother and child, et cetera. And we're talking about, again, the reticular activating system, the embodied cognition, how this can be shaped, modulated, mutated, or else how it could potentially be affected. And I'll try to skip ahead here over this stuff, but this is a great quote. So now before we go to the next phase here, I want to stress that, okay, Margaret Mead, there's a video, she talks about the family, the family of the future, made in like early 70s. And she interviews all these couples. Like one couple is a a man and two women with their kids, and they all sleep in the same bed. And the guy, they started out with the two couples living together, and now the one guy has both girls, and they're lying in bed, and the kids, and Margaret Mead, it's in her video, and saying this is a family of the future, where you've got this couple where, you know, the woman left her husband, they all three have sex together, and the kids sleep in the same bed. There you go. And that's Margaret Mead's family structure, or part of it. But this is about what happened to cybernetics. It sort of faded from favor in the U.S. Okay, and he's talking about you know, the cybernetics book, which came out about the same time as a Kinsey book by Norbert Wiener and was just as much a bestseller. But anyways, Mead, he's talking about Norbert Wiener. Yes, he wrote the book Cybernetics and sort of patented the idea to that extent. Then he went to Russia and was very well received. The Russians were crazy about this right away. And this is in early 50s, right? Late 40s. And it fit right into their lives. But one of the big difficulties in Russian psychology is that they have this great difficulty learning anything that's irreversible. So cybernetics spread all over the Soviet Union very rapidly. And in Czechoslovakia, where they actually use cybernetic systems to model the culture. So that's just a little, you know, I'm throwing stuff out there. You know, like I said, I can't go into, you know, too much detail here, because then we'll be here for like seven years. But anyways, so Mead set up the Society for General Systems. They're looking directly into social organization. Okay, social organization. And then we have this model of these various systems, and this goes to neurophysiology. There's you know, biocomputing, right? That's all part of the cybernetic system. To fuse man as a machine, to model the human behavior as a machine, and also be able to replicate and extend processes from both the social individual level to groups to societies, even globally. So that was the very important part about cybernetics. And then again, note the fact that it became very popular in Russia. And this became, in the US, it sort of fell on hard times, and they changed the name. As I mentioned, the Society of General Systems Research. And like I said, it was very popular when it first came out. It was, you know, that's where you have the book Psycho-Cybernetics. The self-help movement came directly out of cybernetics. The word cyber culture, cyberspace, all the stuff came directly out of cybernetics. In fact, you know, but you know, again, it fell out of favor, and then the CIA began to fund the cybernetics research in the U.S. at the same time. Well, before about, you know, 15
was it ever
years.
really separated from them?
Well, you know, there is a sense where it did fall out of favor in terms of application, and people started to poke holes in it and counteract it. So it had this big fad. It started to kind of, at the same time, it started to fall out of favor. It was introduced in the Soviet Union and became very, very potent and powerful there. But then the CIA began to sort of vamp up research, most likely because, to a certain degree, of the Soviet interest. But also, again, we have, you know, that's a whole nother story. But Rand, you know, Rand Corporation, all this other stuff. But I think partially you know, it could have been something where some of the cybernetics people either pissed people off, or they were, you know, who knows? Or it could be a cover story, you know, just like neuro-linguistic programming that was just everywhere in the, you know, when it came out, 78, you know, whatever, late 70s. Then you have like Anthony Robbins, his self-help empire came out of neuro-linguistic programming, and many other people. And then it sort of completely faded from the public ken and was just listed as this discredited system that no longer works. And so we just poke holes in it. And there's a few people out there that still do it, but it did nowhere like the media exposure. But at the same time, of course, what happened, it became embedded right into the media systems to a certain extent, and all kinds of other areas. So there could be a parallel with that, with the cybernetics and NLP, in terms of suddenly kind of falling out of favor and actually being integrated in it. And so, you know what I mean? So the information is not as...
And they also went from NLP to NVC, but all of those were, you know, MK Ultra programs. Dr. Carl Rogers and Robert Anton Wilson, Richard Bandler, and John Grinder were all behind that. But, you know, this was MK Ultra Subproject 97. and they move on with it and kind of morph it into nonviolent communication by Marshall Rosenberg, and it's promoted by Tides Canada, Rianne Eisler, Terrence McKenna. They all use it or used it. Rianne Eisler was Club of Rome and Club of Budapest, and she was involved heavily in cybernetics with Gregory Bates and etc. So then we see how they kind of morph all of this and then use it. And we see all of this stuff out there today. The language is about focusing on your supposed needs. Well, you're upset. It's not the fact that somebody's lying and selling false information. You're upset, so you must have some need that isn't being met. What is that need? And it's like, well, the need is for you to tell the frickin' truth, not to make up and spin it on me, and then to create a sort of a kill the messenger type of scenario or appeal to ridicule. And you take it away from the focus on the facts to the needs of the person. And so in this way, it's an ad hominem attack, and it constantly shifts the conversation away from facts and information into feel-good stuff.
No, absolutely. Yep. And if it looks like it's kind of scary seeing myself. I'm trying to type. I have my computer elevated, so it's about to fall over, and I saw myself on the YouTube, a little bit delayed. That was scary. So
yeah. I know. I see you on there too. It's definitely scary stuff.
hey man, that's not cool, buddy. Hey man, we're having conflict here. So there's the name Utpala Bora. That's actually me, and I'm just posting some terms here, but I'll probably do that in a bit when Jan goes off.
All right. Well, for some reason it just YouTube just went like totally changed screens on me here. I'm wondering what the heck just happened. Did they just like switch like their system like live during the dang show? All I did was hit refresh and it totally changed the stupid screen here. It was acting up weird. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, I'll try not to get too much into the chat. I will bounce back. If I start reading it, I'll lose my train of thought, which is a very fast train. So anyways, okay, just again, we looked at several different aspects. Now let's look a little bit more into the science, science stuff. And just what I want to say that there's reason to believe that the programmability of the brain extends far beyond childhood, right? So the stuff can be changed and rechanged, and so that's the positive side, is all these things can be broken. But it's just interesting to kind of understand what's going on. So, and this is neuroscientist guy. Okay, so this guy named Mornier, who's a neuroscientist, and I'll kind of break this down after I read it. It is hardly necessary to recall what happens to the electrical activity of the brain when a subject suddenly awakens and becomes alert or excited. There's a real spectrum of changes paralleling the transition from deep sleep to alertness or an excitatory state, or from deep narcosis to wakefulness. The chief changes are accompanied by electrical activities of increased frequency and lower voltage, the so-called desynchronization of electrical patterns. At the same time, the cortex becomes more reactive to afferent stimuli. All organs, including the cortex, can be considered as a terminal organ, simultaneously show a change in reactivity and functional readiness. The shift may be due to a greater generalization of afferent stimuli or to a greater reactivity of the sensory, cortical, and motor organs of the same stimuli. On the contrary, in deep sleep, So anyways, what we're saying is that we have this idea that there's this electrical activity. Our brains are run on electrical activity. There's an excitation and there is a slowing down in terms of how that brain responds to stimulus. And one of the ways to do that, and primarily to do, is actually through varying the stimulus, using rhythm, using things like entrainment, etc. Okay, so we have we have electrical voltage, we have overstimulus, and then and affecting. We'll see even that. So the way it affects your respiration, your blood flow, your heartbeat, etc. And this is also happening with music, right? So we see that music in a sense, or music, not necessarily music on its own, but basically that the effect of this stuff can go from a whole range of levels. We hadn't even gotten into the social coding, but basically to say that we have a variety of processes that can be influenced, and this reticular activating system becomes a core network, right? When this is moved in, and you have like different types of neurochemicals being released, things like this. This is how these states can they go from being a physiological condition to becoming a psychological condition, thus thereby creating a loop, right? A cybernetic type of a loop with positive feedback, which means that the loop is just going to keep going, if not increase in intensity. So we, again, remember these reversal terms. All right. So that's, I'm going to skip. I have way too much the neuroscience stuff. I'm just going to stop there. I can bring stuff up later, but I'm tired now. My brain hurts. I had to think too much. No, just kidding. But so we look at this, and then just the last thing I'll just mention is self-esteem, right? So this idea, this concept of self-esteem, how it was introduced, how it's very much connected with all of these things: self-concept, self-worth. I think it was named Rosenberg or Rosenblum, the guy that developed this self-esteem test. And so the self-esteem, we have these new words being coined, right? Self-mastery, self, whatever. So you find some words, right, that existed before, but we really see a huge generation of these hyphenated terms. The key thing is that the person is broken off and observing themselves. So self-esteem doesn't, okay, technically you could say, oh, I have high self-esteem today. I feel great. Like James Brown, he always has high self-esteem. Yeah, and I'm not talking about
high on cocaine.
No, actually, he used to do PCP. That's even a PCP addict. I mean, to even become a PCP addict, that's an accomplishment. I'll give him that. But and he did feel good. I'm sure until he died. But so self-esteem is actually related to how you see yourself in social groupings in the eyes of others, and how you interpret that back to yourself. So you're seeing yourself through how you think other people think about you, and then you're thinking about that. So that's what self-esteem is. It's already got all of these dichotomous splits, and we've already cut ourself off, right? In a sense, well, self is cut off. The self is observing the self that doesn't have self-esteem, and it's like attached to you, but you're actually not even seeing yourself as you evaluate and judge yourself. You're seeing yourself as, in the eyes of others, as you imagine what others think about you. And the thing is, self-esteem, it's a constant battle. It can go up and go down. You can lose self-esteem, So we see all this politically correct culture also coming out of this "you hurt my feelings" stuff.
Yeah.
But also it's an ideal formulation. If you take this on, if it's promoted to you, if it's embedded into your life, like people that hang themselves after watching Alice Cooper do it, or people that, get depressed when their likes go down on Facebook, or people that fall off cliffs taking selfies. That's different, but it's the same, it's a similar process, but it is directly coming out of cybernetics. And again, this type of model, if this is what you think your psychology works, and you even use this term, you've already put yourself into someone else's system that's being embedded into your own mind, that will make it even more difficult to retract things, and also make you more pliable to these types of influences. And again, the stuff I'm saying, it's starting from the bioenergetic level. It's starting from a physiological level, beyond all the demons, from the dead chickens.
The Dashing Rogue asks, so they are burning ideas into the mind to strengthen the neural pathways in the brain in a nutshell, ?
It's okay. We have to see that certain baseline systems, right? So basically what you are aware of, right? There are things you don't notice. There's things that you see. There's a way that you experience the world, what gets your attention, what creates arousal, what creates the deactivation of that. That's really, we're talking on a sort of a baseline level of the human organism, right? So we have that, right? And then you have, neural pathways, you have habit patterns, but we have to look again, this is the entire mind body and the mind as embodied in a social environment. So, I hope I'm not jumping too far. So certainly creating neural pathways, but we have to look at it as these kind of stacked cubes, this tetragrammaton, this secret box of principles, right? That are there, in which this is not something of course this is how you are, right? This is called being a human being. Just deal with it, man. Unless you're an alien, some kind of a lizard, and you don't have any emotions. But basically, yeah. So, but it does. Neural pathways is certainly part of it. Again, you have to look at the stuff is influences, and we're talking about these loops. And then I didn't get into the autopoiesis, which is the self-sustaining loops with all these different types of things that are going in there, right? And it's quite a complex concept, but this relates to an individual and how all these things can function in a single individual. Hopefully I didn't make it more.
I wonder if all of these systems, if we were able to make all of these systems collapse that the CIA and these intelligence groups are all running, and it just like where people are shocked into awakeness, even for an hour, what the frick would happen if people suddenly were shocked into awakeness,
Yeah. No, exactly. Okay. So now let me, I deleted my, Bash, the great professor, the great guru. I won't even say his name. I'll just say JP. So, but I'm not going to go into that.
I got a funny feeling in my stomach when you said just the initials.
That's dude. Anyways, so now let's look at this. Now we're talking about antinomian music, and now we're actually going to the sort of the heart of the show. Oh, we're done. No, okay. I'm just getting started here. Oh my God!
Tease the audience. You're gonna get them freaked out and upset.
No. I'm not teasing. I just.
You know what? And why don't we ask for of course, all of this research that we do is paid for by public donations. So please donate to Dr. Hans Utter, and that's hansutter.com. And what's your email address again, so people can write you and donate?
hansutter@hotmail.com.
And then, of course, you can donate to contact@logosmedia.com or go onto the website or hit the super chat, or there is a Patreon button in there. I would really love for someone to buy me a nice dinner tonight. I'm freaking starving. I need to get dinner right after we're done here. And, man, we only brought in like $47 tonight. Pretty bad night. It's actually been a pretty bad last month, too. So any and all support is greatly appreciated, especially during the holidays. And throw Hans some love, too, so we can keep doing more of this research, I mean, shoot, Hans knows. I've been calling him on the phone, digging through the archives at Princeton, just going, reading him up-to-the-minute discoveries and stuff while we were in the archives digging through stuff. But anyway.
Yeah, no, that's... that's important, and I appreciate it. And like I said, I'm going through a lot of material in a certain way. I'm truncating certain parts of it because some of it's very complex. But hopefully, as I go to the second phase, it'll start to become much more clear. And this is where I was going to do a little music break, but I'll do this little first thing, then I'll start playing all these music clips that I prepared here. So, so we look at. Now we're looking at music. The importance of music is that it actually, just like all the systems I mentioned, music cuts across all these levels, can influence all these levels, can heal, can change, can transform, either in positive or negative ways, right? So we have not only the effect on the awareness, arousal, we have effect on the brain, neural processing, on the limbic system, on the cognitive system, on the intelligence, and also being a manifestation of a type of a social order, right? And that's something that's been seen by a lot of people. Whether or not you subscribe, I think I talked about some time ago, was about the Chinese, right? How they saw the entire order of their society. emanating from music, and we see
What was
this.
that in like episode 1 or 2 we did on music, mind control, and psychobiology?
No, I think I brought that up. I did show with you like a couple months ago, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. So, anyways, but what we see is that the order, the principles of these types of rhythms and tonal intervals, which we say that we have tonal music, right? Is a classical music, or the way that these intervals come. We see this naturally occurring in children's development. So the development of language, even humming simple melodies, we don't see kids. I mean, they naturally, this stuff sort of is part of the developmental process, and it's related to also how they're situated in the world. But there's something very fundamental about some of the organizing and ordering principles in music, right? And especially the tonality, these rules and these systems, right, that are in place. That there's certain reasons for that, and these relate to many other types of far more complex systems. Not only the human body, but we can look at all types of everything from seasonal motion to planetary rotation to biological processes to cellular activity, et cetera. We can find sort of replication of some of this type of basic order coming from some of this we describe as this music that's evolving from type of we describe as tonality. Because what I'm going to talk about is atonality, of course. So I just wanted to say what tonality is and why that it's important. And so I don't know. Should I did put my sitar over there, so I'll play it before I have to play some other music. So, all right. So I'll just, if you got any questions, that's fine. I'll just grab my sitar. It's just literally right here. Um, so
Hopefully
yeah.
people throw us some more love. Nobody so far tonight, man. It's been a slow couple of weeks, boy.
Oh, well. Okay. Well, here we go.
Got
So anyways,
159 people watching right now. That's not too bad.
yeah. All right. So let me grab the sitar here. All right. Yeah. Well, I just not. I actually have a concert. I didn't have time to practice because of preparing for the show. And I said, you know what? I'll play a bit of sitar because we have to listen to a lot of this different kind of music. So, anyways, this is a sitar. Can you hear that? Okay.
Oh yeah.
Play a little bit of this Rag Yemen. All right, there we go. Just
The concert before the concert, ladies and gentlemen, right here at Logos Media.
Yeah, that's
Hans
not.
Utter's standing ovation, everybody.
Oh well, now I'm trying to. It's not, the proper way to play sitar. I have to sit on the floor, so I was balancing it on a drum throne. But anyways, so let's look into now atonality. And so,
Somebody said they could feel their chakras aligning.
well, hopefully, I mean, the music. That's one of the things is that you have these systems of music. There's something there. I mean, at least to me, and hopefully your chakras are aligned. So well, hopefully they're certainly not going to be disaligned. But anyway, so we have this movement, right, starting in the early 20th century of atonal music, right? So this is it, and it's a lot of ways much more shocking, say, than Alice Cooper or something, because we're suddenly going against the ordering of this whole system, right, that's developed. We have the tonal system of music in Western classical music, and just tearing it down and starting over again. And so Arnold Schoenberg was really the kind of progenitor of this. He's a Viennese composer, and he came up with this idea that music, to be liberated, so to speak, should be no longer obey any rules, but should instead follow these it's called serialism, these like patterns of 12 notes that are arranged mathematically, and the music was arranged to follow this type of mathematics. But it really completely overturned the entire basis of music up to that point instantly. It wasn't like it just kind of came, it wasn't like there was a progression towards that. I mean, there were some precursors, but this was a radical step that he made. And so I just want to play a little clip here of Schoenberg. This is actually when he was in his wild stage, before he, where he was no longer sort of following some of these rules. It's during the Expressionist period, you see like Nosferatu, that kind of thing. But so this is Pierre Lunet, and just listen to this. He actually went much further than this with the full serial music, but this is Pierre Lunet. It's only 1 minute and 35 seconds. So here we go.
Den Wein, den man mit Augen trinkt, dies nachts der Mond den Bogen liegt. Und seine Spannblut
Little loud.
Okay.
You can turn it up a little bit from there. That's a little low. There you go. Am I going to be able to unprogram my brain from this?
Well, this is a little more advanced. So it keeps going, right? So and this is again before he went fully serial. So to understand, though, he began experimenting like 1901, 1914. So this is when it was starting. This we have all these changes, a lot of this stuff happening. Even like the Rite of Spring, which we'll talk about, was in 1913 when that came out. And so this. So this, when he went through this music is radically. So that's not even the 12-tone stuff, right? That's there's still something kind of there, because this is the Expressionist, but you can see it's about someone obviously going insane or being insane, right? So it's almost like this replication almost of a type of insanity within the music, but at the same time, that this was going on. There's also a sense of man usurping the natural order, the natural way that tones and frequencies and relational systems go together, and you're completely taking that, just pulling it away from any types of moorings and creating your own system, right? So it's almost like a type of rebellion against, you'd say, not say rebellion against God is probably pushing it, but you could say in a certain way it is a rebellion against logos and
Right.
these things.
Well, it's
You know?
very Discordian, which is Satanism, so that would be against, God or Logos.
Yeah, I promise no one will be harmed by any of the music examples I play. These are from. I mean, you have to understand this is the conceptual basis, right? These are the high culture people that set the stage. This is all like Alice Cooper. I mean, if he sees this, he'll probably send me a donation, man. I'm giving him so much street cred. He probably doesn't know who. He probably thinks Schoenberg is a type of German mustard or something. Maybe. But but anyways, just to note that this stuff, again, this music, people, I mean, I assume people, even though this is it's more than 100 years old, this piece, it's still pretty disturbing, right? It's still kind of, and you listen to the entire thing, it's like an hour long, right? That's just a little segment of it. But what we have, though, is this stuff just came out of nowhere, almost fully developed. You have Les Six. So Les Six was a group of composers that was looking at to create more of it's sort of this avant-garde, and there's several variations of that. And so you have these like sort of people just coming out with this music that's very disturbing. And then we have you can bring up a picture if you want, is Igor Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring. And so again, Schoenberg, it wasn't like people weren't rushing out and buying concert tickets, but Stravinsky had this ballet that he made, right? He had this ballet called The Rite of Spring. And he actually described this piece as being basically channeled, right? He said the piece wrote itself through me, but it has very, very intense rhythms. It has very powerful. You hear that in a lot of the stuff actually shown up in horror movies and film scoring, right? So atonal stuff you hear a lot in horror movies, but this dun 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 dun, this type of additive rhythm was very much part of Rite of Spring. But Rite of Spring, when the first performance, and the basic plot is it's a pagan, in pre-Christian Russia, where there's a ceremony, a pagan ceremony to sacrifice a young girl, done in 1913, right? So the girl who's going to be sacrificed ends up becoming insane with the music of the ceremony and dances herself to death. But that's the plot of the ballet, or this piece of music. But when this was performed, I read a recent account at the time, and people sitting next to each other, everyone was silent for about 2 minutes. People then started arguing. People started hitting each other with objects. Then they started throwing stuff at the orchestra and yelling at the audience. And people were breaking out into fistfights because of the music. It created this massive pandemonium. There was like a moment of people just being totally entranced, and then suddenly this mass pandemonium broke out, right? And so that's the sort of a core part of this, is that we have this antinomian stuff, and we have this atonality being sort of pushed in. And then also we have, Schoenberg, there's a lot we could go into his more details of his background. But one thing he says is, I do this music because it pleases me. And that's why, and it's there. But the music, of course, it's very difficult because it's like writing a computer program, but it's by its nature, it's going to be horrendously disorienting, ugly, and just, well, not to say ugly, but very extreme dissonance, right? But to say that one of the things that killed classical music in America was the promotion and, in fact, the funding of all the composition professors in the United States to only be atonal serial composers. So they're making these tone rows. It's like bits of numbers, and they just make the stuff up. And they use these configurations to create these sort of, mathematical architectures that are just, blisteringly, dissonant. And also there's no rest right in that. It's completely dislocated, rooted. So all the composers, you had to be a 12-tone composer. And this is based on the Cold War, Soviet Union, who was actually focusing on more classical tonal music, but they had banned this music. So somebody convinced, it may have actually been Mr. Theodore Adorno, who convinced the State Department that the United States should only promote this atonal music, and thereby generations and generations of composers were forced to write this music. If you wrote, more traditional or music based off of harmonic tonality, you could either you had to hide that or you couldn't work in the university, and it really stifled it. At the same time, he killed the audiences for the orchestras, and kind of, obviously music developed, but it certainly hindered that massively. And again, that was directly funded by the CIA, promoted, most likely by Adorno, who himself was an atonal composer. And not to get too far afield, but the tonal system has been described by many people as a representation of Western society and Western culture, although it's normally described in negative terms as the industrialized, patriarchy and this stuff. But the music, that tonal music, was seen as the representing the social order, and atonal music was seen as a disruptive force against that social order. So I can keep going, but if you want to,
yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
I'm just reading some of the comments in the chat, seeing if anybody has any interesting questions or comments.
Okay, so we'll just move on and look at a few more of these composers here. Another one is Varese. And one thing that I wanted to mention is that when we see this movement of music away from someone developing into an artist and trying to access the highest parts of their experience and their being, because what they're putting out is going to affect other people. But it's also, there's almost sort of an idealized sense. There's a sense of trying to, you may be an angry person, but when you write music, you're trying to connect with a higher ideal, and a universal ideal. You're not just staring in the mirror and just like, I hate life, man, life sucks, which is, or the anger and all this stuff, this idea of just staring in the mirror, right? You see this loss of responsibility for creating and putting music out there. And then the second side is just to say, well, whatever I'm feeling is great. I don't need to go beyond my own self because my emotions are the most important. And so then you get this process of people potentially creating music that reflects their own insanity, or perhaps can produce insanity. Hopefully not. And this stuff won't. But this guy is a very interesting composer.
Like what's her name in Ireland that just became a Muslim, Sinead O'Connor. Good grief.
She's cool. I almost shaved my head because I liked her so much.
You should.
I almost became a Celtic. I was trying to do like Sinead O'Connor
she
covers.
Became a Muslim now. And then last month she almost killed herself, and then this month she's a Muslim because she hates white people so much. She's got all the white shame and white guilt that's all being promoted to the NPCs by Soros and all.
Yeah, no, I was trying to become more diverse. And so I had a couple options. One was, becoming a male Sinead O'Connor cover artist, or imitating Tracy Chapman.
Oh, God.
Male version of Tracy. Okay. Yeah. But
that's not even attractive as a female version. Oh, my goodness.
Okay, so now let's move into another composer, right? So we have the concept of not only of, so first of all, you have this idea of realism, right? So you're removing this idea of an ideal reflection, or trying to go to a higher spiritual plane through the music, or trying to connect with, you can have tragedy and sorrow, but you're not trying to just, you're trying to get something larger, right? You're trying, there's that responsibility that's gone. But also this idea of this, what's described as realism. So you're realistically reflecting the environment and things like that. And so what we have is Edgar Varese, who is a huge influence on Frank Zappa. He's around the same time, around 30s, 20s, 30s, getting started. So what he did was use environmental noise, right? He had songs where he used noise of industrialization. He would use, sounds. I'm actually going to play a couple pieces of his. So Deserts, the piece Deserts is use industrial noises. And then we have Poème électronique, which was performed with 400 speakers. So he had set up, this is, I think, 1940, something like that. It was performed 400 separate speakers, one of the first people to use electronic music. So music critic describes, this is a contemporary Francis Ruth describes Satie's piece Deserts. It does not seek to assert the human will so much as to submit it to the timeless void that is nature. We move through a wasteland of sound. So that's the timeless void. That is the Ein Sof, right? That's a little Kabbalism there. So let's check out Poème électronique, which is early kind of electronic-ish piece with 400 speakers originally performed. Anyone even heard of electronic music,
Oh,
that was
God.
a
Like a
41.
Grateful Dead space session or something.
Yeah, well, here's the very end here. Okay, well, that's okay. And this is a singer. There's a female singer who's almost like this demonic entity, whatever. Okay, so that's Varese, right? So Edgar Varese, and very important, these are very prominent composers. This is what is going on in the world of classical music in 1910, 1920, 1930, right? So this complete revolt.
Did you change your volume level?
Oh, I did, yeah, because I was
there you go.
Didn't want vape sounds to come through. So,
jeez,
hey man, So let me play one more little piece of Varese. This is just it's only a 30-second clip. This is from the piece Deserts that uses industrial noise. So here we go. Okay, that wasn't that much there. That's just a clip. Let me stop that. But anyway, so he had industrial sounds. He had actual factory horns and steam engine equipment. So we have this idea. And so the Varese says, quote, speed and synthesis are the characteristics of our epoch. We need 20th century instruments to help us realize those in music. So instruments made of, car parts and stuff like that. Okay, so let's move on. So what we see that, these are, pretty radical musicians. And then we have John Cage, of course, a very famous composer. He was, and a lot of these people were also kind of linked with the Beats, by the way. But so John Cage, very important composer, and one of the most extremely radical composers. And he started using indeterminacy, which is chance, aleatoric music, where things are randomized, all kinds of things like that. He's famous for this piece called 4 minutes and 33 seconds, which I just realized, if you have 4 minutes, it's 240 seconds. You got a 6/6 or a 6/3/3 something. But that's a piece of total silence where the artist sits down, piano player sits down and opens the piano, just sits there for exactly 4 minutes and 33 seconds. And the audience is supposed to reflect upon their own nature, right? But he was, sort of a Zen Buddhist, and he was very, very influential, for his entire lifetime. But let me just read a bit of John Cage. This is a speech he gave at the Juilliard School of Music in 1952. And he says, I have nothing to say, and I am saying it, and that is poetry as I need it. Contemporary music is changing, but since everything's changing, we could simply decide to have a glass of water. To have something to be a masterpiece, you have to have enough time to talk when you have nothing to say. So that was his whole lecture at Juilliard. In between, he was like banging random noises on the piano.
And of course, he was New School of Social Research, which we discussed last week.
Yeah. And so John Cage really championed this idea that you cannot judge. You can't have a value judgment about it. It's beyond your value judgments. Music is no longer art, culture, anything is no longer in a domain. If you inflict a value judgment on something and say, I like it or I don't like it, I forget exact quote. He's like, then you're trapped. You only are a value judgment and you can't understand my music with your framework of value judgments. Okay.
Wow. Always selling the, it goes along with the same theme of moral relativism,
Yeah. And I'll just read an example of just a John Cage performance described by someone who saw it. Okay, some of these compositions are a type of glorified play. For example, cartridge music. Phonograph needles are attached to an overhead boom and the edge of and center of a table, chosen for the resonance of its vibrations when shoved back and forth across the floor. Cage and a companion, each following a different graphic pattern of events by chance, insert slinkies, pipe cleaners, miniature flags, and even tiny birthday candles into the needle slots of the cartridge and agitate them, thereby producing noises in the loudspeakers, which accompany the performance with low vibration sounds culled from the records of his music. One watches the actions of the two performers as on days one watch the actions of the clowns circulating around the three rings of the circus, and then they get more and more crazy and they can end up smashing and breaking their equipment. And so we have, okay, anyway, so I'll leave John Cage there, but a very, very extremely influential figure, not some, random person. He was extremely powerful, extremely potent, and extremely influential on aesthetics, art, etc. And also on our culture where you can't evaluate or judge anything, right? Because you'll hurt their feelings. So I'll just move on to another composer, Lamont Young, who's connected with the Velvet Underground, connected with Andy Warhol's factory scene, and a whole bunch of other people in the New York City kind of warehouse. I think Cale from Velvet Underground actually worked with Lamont Young or was a student. And so Lamont Young was, really, moving for this very intense, even a higher level of what he's doing. But I want to play an example here of a piece, right? And to understand this piece, this is called The Tortoise, His Dreams and Journeys. The Tortoise, His Dreams and Journeys. It's the name of the piece. Okay, this piece, when it was actually performed, there were two segments that went for 2 hours each. What you hear was, 100 plus decibels, louder than a rock concert, actually. A lot of people went there. Stockhausen was pretty hip. A lot of people, when this came out in the 60s, people were taking LSD. With the title of the work like that, you think, hey, man, it's going to be a nice, relaxing trip. I'll go ahead and, do that. So he listened to this piece and imagined this blasting at loudspeakers for 2 hours with a short break, and then it starts up again for another 2 hours. It's a 4 hour long piece. Here we go. Is it trying to fast forward?
Turn it down. There you go. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's the piece. That goes on for 2 hours at massively blasting levels, and it's just that drone. You can hear a little bit of the Velvet Underground sound in that, right? That is almost like, as we look into it, like sort of like we look at the Soviet type of mind control experiments and an actual permanent reconditioning or repatterning with sound influence for people that don't even know they're being mind controlled and have just taken a schizophrenogen, a psychedelic drug. So that's another example of, again, this avant-garde cultural movement, which again precurses and undergirds a lot of the stuff that was happening in 60s rock, we do see a big interplay when, the rock, with the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's, the rock artist becomes elevated almost to like a classical level status. And I'll just finish up this real quick here. Last example. I won't play all of them. This is, let's see, where did that go? So this is Stockhausen, who's actually kind of an interesting composer. But this composition is called Sirius, and it was supposedly meant to draw down the cosmic energy from the planet Sirius and invoke the beings from them and draw their energy down to the Earth plane. But just listen to a little bit of the composition Sirius from another avant-garde composer, Karl-Heinz Stockhausen.
It stopped.
No, it's still going. There's silence in there. Stick another cut. Anyways, so there's microphones getting electronic sound. Anyway, so this is a pretty weird piece. You have to listen to the whole thing. I'm not going to play it, but so this is high art, right? This is the pinnacle of Western civilization now. We've gone from the development of a tradition, sort of like painting, right? You look at the amazing paintings in the 13th, 15th, 16th century. Then you got Jackson Pollock throwing paint on a canvas. Exact same thing. In a certain way, this has, even though rock is much more pernicious, this undergirded a lot of the stuff and also helped justify. But in a sense, there was a similar agenda. Agenda is maybe a little bit too far, but we'll look at actually. So let me just finish up here with this section real quick. And so we have. So we move into this idea, which happened a little bit around the same time. Well, now we're kind of in the mid 60s here. The idea of actually composing music to directly manipulate the brain, to have it listened to through electrodes or even implants, and of trying to design a music like that. I'm just going to read a quote. This is LaRousse talking about this. The new music made possible by the new instruments and procedures will not be less or more valid. It will be different. It has been said in a few years' time, our understanding of the reactions of the central nervous system will have advanced so far that it will be possible to produce functional music predetermined according to parameters defined by the laws of sociology and human behavior. Knowledge of sensory systems will permit the diffusion of this music by direct application of electrical stimuli. The musical element will be established, and the instruments of music will have become a clinical electrode applied to the forearm. So we have this idea now of actually connecting music as directly behavioristic, kind of Skinnerian, but actually directly working on the central nervous system, bypassing anything else. So in a sense, you're going to call it music. It's actually a type of electronic, neural stimulation that, that will produce these types of changes or states. And that's one thing that Jerry talks about when he talks about virtual reality, is this kind of music, but it's actually just created from these, it's directly working on the electromagnetic, neural circuitry, et cetera, et cetera. And so, as we look, there's a bunch of these different composers that did this, and it's still going, right, that are doing this thing of even looking at almost like genetically modifying human voices, merging voices together. You have this guy, David Lloyd, who's an inventor connected with this movement of this actually sounds kind of fun. It's a vibratory belt. It's a pad you wear in your pants when you listen to music, and it actually vibrates with the music and vibrates, I guess would vibrate your special parts, while you're listening to the Rolling Stones.
Well, I'm sure. Well, and that's why, you go to, not that I've been to one in 15 years, you go to a trance show and everybody's like sitting on and rubbing all over the big bass speakers, they're getting off on them, especially when they're on like MDMA or some drug.
Yeah, exactly. And then we have this guy named Four Hands, another one of these composers who says his music, if you don't call that, can reproduce like an LSD experience, can even create an orgasm.
Yeah.
So we're calling it music. It's something. It's a different thing. But this has been researched. This is again coming from these composers and all this stuff. And so this is very much in the electronic music. Of course, we have like Perez, Stockhausen, Cage. These are the early pioneers. I mean, even obviously, some of this technology was invented for these guys to use. So this is way before even the Moog synthesizer or whatever came along. So we look at this idea that music can actually reshape reality, right? So it's not only which I'll talk about some of the physical effects here in a second. But music actually can start to reshape reality by removing these orders, right? By taking away these orders that are implicit in the customs and the structures, even in the behavioral practices, right? We have types of inhibitions that, these are not necessarily life-threatening, but I mean, if you want to pull your pants down and run down the street, you're going to have inhibitions about doing that, right? So there's inhibitions that are also culturally generated, right? There's inhibitions like you can't, well, some people do, right? You can't just, if you're attracted to a woman, you don't just walk up and grab her or something like that. And people do that, but they don't have these inhibitions, which there's a behavioral impulse. Someone may have the exact same thought, but they have these inhibitions. So what we have is a modulation of senses of excitation, but also socially conditioned inhibitions, or say socially conditioned structures.
Are they inhibitions or are they guidelines of behaviors so that we can have a properly functioning society?
Yes, but I mean, what I'm saying is inhibitions, as these are sort of almost hardwired, right? Like you have, inhibitions. What I mean, I'm actually talking in the sense of the like central nervous system, where if you try to take some of these actions, you're not, like, for example, cliff diving off a cliff. You're not, you just be like, man, I can't do that. You're not just going to go run and jump off the cliff. I mean, you might. But same thing. So these behaviors, yes, there is that aspect, obviously, that these are established rules and guidelines and moralities, but they also become sort of implicit in the conditioning, right? Being polite is a type of inhibition of behavior where you don't raise your voice. You don't punch somebody when they cut in front of you in line. You may say, oh, that wasn't cool. But, so these are, there's modes of behavior, but then on a deeper level, these are sort of ingrained into how, going back to what I talked about in the beginning, right? How we function in the world, how we perceive the world, how our, basically how the senses are interpreted, and so this is one of the parts actually of music, was to also create type an organized, orderly society, right? And that was the big critique of a lot of these new composers, as I already mentioned, that this fudgy, or what do you call fuddy, whatever you call it, fuddy-duddy classical music is part of the capitalistic control system, and we need social revolution like we have now, which is really done us a lot of good, right? So does that make sense? So the inhibition, there's an inhibitory reflex. It's like a reflex, and yes, it is conditioned culturally, because technically nothing's stopping you from just, if you see food, you just don't, steal it, right? There's an intellectual sense, but also, I'm not telling people to try this out, but if you probably had people dare you to do something and you just couldn't do it, you know what I mean? You were just, it felt like you felt blocked from doing it, and probably it was a stupid thing to do. But when you lose these inhibitions, some of them, then you can lose the moral inhibition, but the actual impulse is different, right? Does that make sense?
Yep, it does.
Okay, cool. So we look at this, we see music, right? Especially this loud music, rock music, but all kinds of music influences, powerful influence on muscular activity, increases or decreases overall muscular activity in the body. It affects the entire body, the entire your muscular system. We're talking about, micro movements and sometimes much more vigorous movements. We see the music actually can start to modulate. It can start to change just on a level of, our all parts of our body, increasing or decreasing activity. In fact, removing energy from muscles and things like that. So that's one thing that happens. And we look at the effect of sound, right? So this may be a old wives' tale or an old rock fan's tale, but supposedly, girls or kids would, I said girls, sorry, that was sexist. It just seems like something a girl would do, but I'm just totally kidding. Where they put eggs on a stage during a rock concert. Their egg would actually have been cooked because of the sound output. It was so from the show, it would actually cook eggs. The egg would be cooked from the vibrational output that's coming out of those speakers. So it's a very powerful, not even the music itself, but the volume and all these other things. So these things can affect the heart rate. They can change your digestion. In fact, it can cause high blood pressure. Rock can actually, they've done studies showing that rock music actually can cause some of it, right? I'm not painting with a broad brush, can cause indigestion. But it also affects your heartbeat, right? So we're going down. We have this cultural level, we have this biological level, this neurological level, but your heartbeat, right? Sorry, I'm talking loud there. Your heartbeat can be influenced, and you actually can start changing the patterns of your heartbeat. And some of those patterns can become entrained, right? They can become almost addictive. And that's how people get addicted to things that are bad for you. I mean, that's part of being addicted. Even people get addicted to having fights all the time, right? You have people that are like that. And then so also certain types of music, for example, Alice Cooper can create epinephrine. Sorry, I'm pronouncing it wrong, but an epinephrine, which is shot into the blood, constricting during stress or anxiety. So, for example, seeing an Alice Cooper show, it's creating this response, right? It's affecting your heartbeat, your skin. You can have stomach spasms, and your heart muscles you can actually get heart flutters from prolonged exposure. So you have not only the effect of the sound, you have the effect of the other type of stimulus. And some of the music we listen to, I don't know if people think that sounds like it's a healthy thing to listen to, but it's, that's part of what this is. You suddenly remove a value judgment, right? And then you're pushing for this effect. And again, not to beat the dead horse of Mr. Alice Cooper, but we see that, again, he was pushed down people's throats. No one wanted to hear it. This atonal music, this experimental music it came from out of nowhere and then it became the dominant force in the contemporary music world, thereby devastating the audience for classical music, right? As well as, how many people could have been really creative musicians that either just gave up or started writing serial music, with all this dissonant stuff because they couldn't get the grants because no one was paying for the CDs or concerts, or not as much anymore. So there you go. But I'm going to say something, Jan.
Oh, well, yeah, now they just put it out there for free. I guess that's why the music is even crappier than it used to be now, I mean, it's like clearly you hear these so-called artists that don't even have any talent, that they're just run through a synthesizer and a board, and that's what they're putting out. They don't have, it lacks any quality. And each generation, they've stepped the quality of the music down, several degrees. But now I don't know how much lower can it go. I mean, how much more fornicating or how much more defecating on stage and whatnot are we going to see, and all that?
Yeah, well, Jan, I mean, one thing to note is that I want to say that, this is what I'm talking about now, sort of the cutting edge, right? This is the most advanced minds and people involved in music, or a lot of them, way above, your rap star or your rocker. But this idea of actually having specific frequencies and tones that will change the brain itself just from that level, right? That going in, I think we could find some evidence of that in some of the newer rap music and stuff like that, right? And so I think it's moving. But anyways, I'll just finish up here before I go off.
Maybe we should do a show just on how to specifically identify this new stuff that they're rolling out.
Yeah. And that's, I haven't looked into that much, but, again, I want to show that this process, if you look at what happened in the early 19th century or 20th century, and then you look at the 60s revolution, we see a continuum and a thread, right? That's tying this together with certain similar types of things. But we move now back to rock music. This is, famous experiment. I had the name of the person who did it, and it's not in front of me. I think it was 1985, but and there's many of these experiments. And I just mentioned this one, they had petunias, right? They had two different sets of petunias. One of them was exposed all day to the classical music station. The other one was exposed to the rock station. Within just several days, the petunias next to the classical music station had moved closer to the speaker. And then the ones near the rock music were moving further away from the speaker. And then the ones that were next to classical music started growing much more rapidly, very healthy. After a month, the petunias exposed to rock music died. So they just withered away and died. Everything else was the same. Volume level the same, watering, whatever, exactly the same. And that's just one example. But
was it Mark Passio's Discordian death metal?
I don't know, man. No, this is just a regular. I think just a regular. They used a radio station in order to have sort of a broad brush. And so briefly, so like Mick Jagger said in 1960s, I think 66, 67, in an interview, they said, like, what do you aim for? Are you trying to become rich and famous? And Mick Jagger said, we are moving after the minds. So are most of the new groups. We're moving after the minds. We're not doing this, not just to make money, not just because we love it, but we're moving for minds and to control and manipulate and shape the minds, right? Another example is John Phillips from the Mamas and the Papas. He bragged that he could actually create a riot through music. And he said, well, most groups know how to do it. And he proved himself. So Saturday Evening Post wrote a story about this, 3/25/67. And they were able to incite a riot just by the music they were playing. They knew how to do it. Okay. So now we just shift here. I know I'm kind of summarizing us trying to get through all this. So we see, though, that in the United States, where suddenly anything goes, right? It's an anything goes culture. So we have all this experimental classical music. We have all this crazy pop music, rock and roll, et cetera, because we're free. We're a free democracy. The Soviets, at the same time, while they maintained their study of cybernetics, also engaged in extremely detailed research, probably similar to MK Ultra, but on this conditioning, operant conditioning. We have Pavlov, we have Luria, and many other scientists. And so the Soviets were fully aware of the effect of music, and they did a lot of studies, and they used music very specifically to for certain types of effects in the society. Hence, things like the Beatles were banned. For example, the Beatles were banned in Israel. I don't know if you knew that. They were not allowed to perform in Israel.
That's hilarious. The MI6 agents weren't allowed to play in Israel, huh?
Yeah.
And people are having a really hard time. They really need to go back, and somebody keeps asking, so you mean like George and the Beatles, they were agents in the chat, but we've done like 43 shows now. I recommend people go back and watch at least my series with Hans, Music, Mind Control, and Psychobiology, so that you can begin to get your mind around how all of the big pop stars are manufactured and sold to us, especially the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and the Grateful Dead and all of this stuff. These are the government agents. The con trick is that these people, go around in black suits and defend us from I don't know, super spies or whatever from Russia, when in fact, most of them are professors, musicians, TV stars, movie stars, professional liars. That's what an actor is, a professional liar. So a lot of actors, but musicians, when you think about it, they travel around with drugs and roadies and equipment, lots of places to stash drugs. You go on lots of tours. You're promoting the social engineering on the road. You get paid for it. And you bring in huge amounts of money that the company, the CIA, uses to fund other mind control projects, etc. So when you get your mind around how this social engineering works, yes, of course, all these people are manufactured idols, rock idols. Get it? Rock idols. They're graven images, rock idols, and you go and you. If you went to Woodstock, you were fornicating in the mud to your rock idols. It's all part of the joke of the Dionysian mysteries and the Babylonian, ancient Jewish Babylonian, rites. So this is what it all ties back to when we get in and we look at it. But we have to be willing to question our heroes and our emotional ties to, our the heroes that we were spoon fed in junior high and high school. I mean, eventually you got to grow up and just let it go.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, that's something that it's kind of low hanging fruit. We talk about satanic, initiation and all this stuff. I mean, I'm trying to get, again, I'm trying to show like a different side to it. Like I said, it's a lot of material, but just to move on forward. So we do have this connection, right, of social revolution. We have a connection of actually communism with some of a lot of these groups, right? They were very active in this, some more than others, but so this certainly was a vector, and there was some promotion. We also have lots and lots of massive infiltration, starting from even the 30s, FDR administration, Harry Dexter White, et cetera, et cetera. Massive amounts of infiltration and, in fact, promotion. And I have lots of FBI documents. Not the FBI is always right, but there's a lot of really interesting stuff about this era and what was going on. But just one study of Pavlov where he conditioned the dog, using a metronome. They were conditioned to 120 beats per minute, the ticking of the metronome, for getting food, and they would automatically salivate at that time. And then they conditioned a dog 60 beats per minute, right? So the 60 beats per minute, they don't get food. So they have this inhibitory or excitatory response, right? Something is, you're not going to eat. There's no food. So you don't salivate. You have food. You want the food. So you're you're going to salivate because that's it's a response, like a physiological brain level response. And then he started juxtaposing the stimuli, and sometimes playing both of them at the same time. And so basically the dogs, they did like at certain stages, like when they're playing both of the beats, and the dogs would actually die. It would actually kill the dogs, or dogs would just stop eating completely. And they could also induce schizophrenia. So, and this is using, again, this rhythm, this metronome, this beat, but it's related to a basic biological process. You go to a far more complex animal like a human being, you can look at, say, about sex, about breaking taboos. That's why also we have this rioting, people going crazy. And I just mentioned the Beatles, right? All the female fans were screaming and going nuts. I mean, they were completely...
Especially the ones, that they put right in front of the camera for the photo op and didn't span back to show that they were all clumped together and screaming, to incite other girls to scream too.
Yeah. And so basically, so what actually happens is that you have these types of artificial neuroses then, which are these patterns that are also linked to types of stimuli that people are totally unconscious that they have any effect on them whatsoever, right? And so you actually have this type of a hypnotic trance state being induced, but then also connected with physiological functioning. And you have something, and I mentioned that condition. It's what is it, museo, whatever, is epilepsy or something, where there's examples of people just hear like a pop song or something, and that one song will actually make them go into epileptic seizures. That one specific song, but with this hypnotic state and this induction, not only of trances, but again, embedding things in almost the physiological base level, as well as behavior patterns, as well as creating these conflicts. And then you have the autopoietic system. Last thing I'll say here, hopefully people weren't too bored, but I thought it's interesting. So this is just someone, Evan von Glasserfield, in an attempt to interpret Matorna. In an autopoietic organism, every perturbation, every experience, every internal event changes the structure of the network that constitutes the organism. So the autopoietic system is the advance of cybernetic theory, where you have these interlocking systems, all these different things that are working together. And I won't get into like temporal, entrainment, isosynchronous activity, et cetera. That's just, I think there we go. That was, people may want to go back and check out the show again. Hopefully I didn't talk too fast this time, but I thought it was...
Watch it 2 or 3 times. It'll settle in,
Yeah. So yeah, well, we
All
can just
43 episodes you and I have done, right?
yep. All right. Well, that's
You're hitting that vape hard tonight, dude.
Man, it's no, no, it's not much in there, man. It's just blowing smoke. It's part of my autopoietic system, so this is like
Yeah, you're getting your feedback loop there. You get your little ding. You step like a little rat stepping on the pedal and getting a little pellet.
no way, not me. It would never happen to me.
No,
No,
no.
my little
Oh,
pellet.
good grief. So yeah, there's I don't know. We got a couple of minutes here before we wrap or hit it up at 2
Any
hours.
questions or anything? Yeah, we can.
People are asking stuff. Any good questions? Most people, if they're asking if somebody is an agent, they probably already know the answer. If they don't provide you the citations that you can fact check and whatnot, we try to provide everything that that we research, and you can go through the database and look. You can use the trivium. Are we making stuff up? Are we supplying the citations and whatnot so that you can follow along? Does it make sense? Are there contradictions? And people really need to grasp that a contradiction is always a lie or an error, and there are no contradictions in nature. God cannot lie. So whenever you see a contradiction, that's where to dig deeper. It doesn't mean throw your arms up in the air and scream, opinions are like you know what. It means you need more information. And when you do that, and when you dig down deeper, when there are no more contradictions, you've arrived at the truth. And that's what people don't want you to understand. And they're trying to take us away from all of it. Somebody's asking about Kravitz. Rock and roll is dead, now in movies, dramas, and members of the NWA made men. I don't know. I think they're all the big stars. They've got to be on the take. Some of them are probably just assets. Some of them might be dupes, but all the big ones, they're on the take. They wouldn't even be big if they weren't dirty, I don't think, because they're selling the whole agenda. You've got to, it's like tenured professors, once you figure out how the peer review system is corrupted and all of that stuff, it's like, okay, so which tenured professors aren't selling an agenda? And once you understand how to identify cells in these little circle jerks that they use that were created by Thomas Huxley, you can get in and begin to figure out how to unravel these cells. Are they always citing each other? Do they go down to the primaries? And if they cite each other and you check the primaries and they're misciting the primaries or taking them out of context and whatnot, then that they're dirty and they're on the take. And, it's from my experience, it's probably all tenured professors. Maybe there's some that aren't at like private schools and whatnot, but I suspect, if you're a tenured professor, you're probably on the take. That's how you got there. That's how that's how you enforce the peer review system and keep dissenting views out that will question and expose how the system works. They don't want a bunch of people going out there who, with the firm grasp of like the Spies and Academic Clothing article on their minds, because then the whole thing starts to fall apart, and then you begin to understand that most of academia is a sham. They're repeating the Royal Society garbage and all of this, manufactured social engineering. They're not interested in facts. They're not interested in teaching you how to think, but rather what to think. And that's the key difference. And that's what we try to do here, is teach people how to think, and then go out there and figure out who's dirty and how this thing works on your own. It's not just up to Hans and I or Caleb and I or Robert and I to expose all of this stuff. We've got to work together and use the trivium and go through and, build our self-esteem up so that we can have faith in our own five senses to bring us the answer and know that we've found the truth, and then share it once we've found it. And that's all that we're doing here. And unfortunately, we keep running into the same people when we dig into this stuff. The Huxleys, Adorno, the Fabians, the Frankfurt School, SRI, CIA, Esalen Institute, Tavistock. over and over ad infinitum. It's always these same groups of people. It's just, a matter of their depth of their involvement in the conspiracy,
Yeah. Well, there's also the function of just having that same process of you can't actually think certain thoughts, right? Do you like even if go through a conditioning process, and so even in academia, you may know some your local neighborhood, you know, super happy liberal, whatever, that just lives in this bubble, and these thoughts or you price it as a cognitive dissonance. People, they flip out because they have this has been set up, and it's now like a physiological response, right? It's now of course this all can be changed, but all this this processes also affect groups of people, right? You have this mass hysteria. You have people's emotional state, even their biorhythms. People are very agitated because you get that energy rush, right? You get that high energy, music, da, 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 and it's like taking some drug, right? It's like taking a drug. It gives you a response, but it's also harmful for you. It's like drinking Diet Coke. Uh, and so you say Ewan Cameron, he said that if you have music made by insane people, it will spread insanity in the world. And this is when you have this idea of, these psychological effects, this idea of psychological contagion, which again ties into Kurt Lewin, and it's things like that. And this is other stuff that kind of disappeared from the academy and from research. These ideas just kind of fell off the face of the earth. But you see that this idea that you can change large scale systems by injecting certain things into them, and people, as people become, if you have people, it's almost like they pass on this insanity. And the same thing when you have these artists, not all of them are agents, but you have someone who's demented, who's, psychologically disturbed, who's, maybe highly ambitious, and that's a great person to roll out, because you're inculcating this person's experience, their madness, their hatred, their whatever it is that they experience, that they're channeling into this music that operates on the listeners. Not necessarily they're an agent, but you get people that fulfill these functions because they're just that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. On some level, some of them aren't going to be willing, knowing agents, but then again, many of them are. It's like that quote from, let me just pull it up here, from Timothy Leary. People freak out when you read this quote, but so let's see here. If we just type in Whitting into the search. Yes, he answered strongly. I was a Whitting agent of the CIA. So you worked for the Central Intelligence Agency, I asked. Is it the deputy director of plans you work for? Who makes your checks? It's none of your business to know how those things work. I'll answer no questions that have to do with business. I'll answer you any questions about history or people. And of course, this is Walter Boert, agent, interviewing Timothy Leary, agent. Yes, he was a Whitting agent of the CIA, and there's, more than once that he admits it. Here's another one. Tim Leary, all right, are undercover agents in Los Angeles, and he's referring to Ken Kesey, the Merry Pranksters et al., all the Grateful Dead people, all the people spreading all the drugs. Yes, they're agents. It's all just social engineering. Laugh it off. Don't take your heroes so emotionally or seriously or whatever. They were manufactured for you. It's like, well, people will say, well, why was Leary thrown in jail? Well, there's a separation between what happens with the local cops, like down in Orange County at Laguna Beach when he's arrested down there and thrown in jail by the Laguna Beach police chief, versus the CIA, and and if you can't exactly have it all exposed there that, the CIA is peddling all the drugs that the local cops are trying to stop on the streets and everything. Otherwise, the local cops would just go arrest the CIA, and we'd shut down the CIA, and the whole thing would be over. But there's an obvious separation between what happens on the local level and with, getting arrested, and Leary spending time in San Luis Obispo prison, which was minimum security, and the whole nonsense story of him hand over fisting his way out on the cable over the fence. And then you have the weathermen there to pick him up and drive him off so that he can be whisked off to meet other agents like Joanna Harcourt Smith, whatnot, and Europe, who rescued him out of Tanzania or wherever the hell he was. But with Grover Cleveland and all these people, but and all of these people are agents on different level. This is their involvement. They're the social engineers. They sell the stuff. This is what Aldous Huxley and Ken Kesey and Allen Ginsberg and all these people. That's how they operate. And whether it's your music heroes, Jim Morrison or Jerry Garcia or whomever. Ozzy Osbourne is another one. I mean, Ozzy Osbourne may be too blasted out of his mind to be one, but he's probably one too. He's certainly satanic enough to be one, and I personally don't find any difference between the occult and the intelligence community. They overlap so much, it's hard to even peel them apart. So anyway, there's my rant for the evening.
Thanks, man. That was a good rant. I enjoyed it. I was thinking, man, I got a rant too. But
you got a rant. Okay? Well, why don't you rant? Sanchez has Sanchez in the chat. He rants on Morrissey. It's really good stuff. People, you got to go into Sanchez's channel and watch his Morrissey rant. It's hilarious. Morrissey is such a soy boy. It's beta soy boy. It's ridiculous.
Oh, have you seen this parody of Henry Rollins?
No.
It's this guy's like, I'm Henry Rollins, and it is so funny. You should play this. It's super funny. I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
It's real short, but
and do you want to play it right now, or is it for another time?
You can just I'll send you the link. It is a good way to close.
Where are you sending it to? Email or in here?
I'll send you in there. Let's see, parody. If I could, maybe it's down. It's really funny though.
But and people, please support and donate. I don't think there's even been any donations for like a half an hour now. We really appreciate all your support and love and kindness and generosity, and it helps cover the bills while we're doing research and gathering all the books and information and whatnot we have to do to cover all of this stuff. Somebody was saying we should rewind the last 5 minutes.
Rewind.
Incredible primary sources. Regarding Leary and whatnot. But it's the same with McKenna. McKenna. It's like people will cite Dennis McKenna, who's also dirty and spins everything, and people will cite Dennis McKenna's attack on me at the Free Your Mind conference, no less, which was a total setup. And, of Dennis saying, Jan's low on his meds, and, Terrence wasn't a part of the CIA, maybe the Galactic Central Intelligence Agency, something like this. But, it's like, look, folks, these are agents. Terrence McKenna, he was an agent. He says, I had a price on my head by the FBI. I was running out of money. I was at the end of my rope. And then they recruited me and said, at the place with the mouth like yours, there's a place for you in our organization, and I've worked in deep background positions about which the less said the better. And then about 15 years ago, they shifted me into public relations. What was Gordon Wasson? All these others were either public or social relations. Tim Leary, Ramdas, all of these guys, they were all social relations out of Harvard, James Fadiman, etc., and a lot of the others were public relations. You have the same MO behind the scenes, and he says, I've been there to the present. And people say, well, the mushrooms recruited him. That's Dennis McKenna blowing smoke up your ass, folks. That's him covering his own ass because he's making money off of this stuff. But mushrooms don't have organizations or deep background positions, etc. Spy agencies do. Mushrooms don't need public relations. That's what spy agencies do. Mushrooms, wouldn't tell him the less said the better about deep background positions. That's what intelligence agencies do. And the mushrooms aren't able to pay him because he's out of money and on the run for selling drugs and smuggling. And in fact, that's what the CIA and these organizations recruit for. Hey, you're a smuggler, you're overseas, you're doing all this stuff. Be one of our mules and carry stuff. And then are the mushrooms able to get him out of trouble with Interpol and the FBI for drug smuggling? Or is that something an agency like the CIA or FBI could do, and it's like, if you go into the brain database, these people that go off on me about Terrence not being, in just a second, I just want to pull this up again. Terrence not being CIA and an agent. What the heck? What happened? Did my program freeze here? Don't tell me the stupid brain just froze on me.
Yeah, Jan, by the way, I'll play that clip. It's
okay,
only,
yeah, go ahead while you're doing that, and I'll relaunch the brain.
And you can put up a picture of Henry Rollins if you want. When I play it, everyone knows he's with Black Flag. We have the whole punk movement. A lot of people coming out of DC. All kinds of interesting connections there, and I could go on and on. So if you're familiar with Henry Rollins, you know how he went from punk rocker to, well, it makes me smile, and I need to smile occasionally. So, wait, where is it?
Henry Lawrence Garfield Rollins. I mean, Lawrence Garfield. He's from the Garfield family.
Rollins. Okay, hold on. Here it goes. All right, here we go. This is just a parody again. So,
hey, this is Henry Rollins. I was in a band in the 80s that everybody says they like, but they don't actually listen to. I'm a vegan, man. Can you handle this? Brace yourself, because I'm about to beat you down with my basic bitch political opinions stated with a determined intensity. You won't be able to handle my conventional majority views stated monotonously over some bland hardcore guitar riffs. See, I'm a punk rocker, but I'm old now, old and wise. Being older means I'm smarter, even though none of my positions have changed since I was an edgy teenager. Can you deal with that, America? I think masculinity is dumb. That's why I make tough guy faces and lift weights and stuff. I'll kick your ass if you like masculinity. I regularly donate to the Southern Poverty Law Center. I really hate Southern poverty. Hopefully we can wipe it out one day. See, I'm a white guy, but I can't stand white guys. This is a brave, bold statement I shouldn't be making. I might lose friends and social capital for saying it. Sorry if that burst your bubble, honky, but that's just how it's gonna be. Homosexuality is natural and normal. Someone has to tell you this, America, and it might as well be me. I can handle the shitstorm that'll follow. I have all those muscles and stuff. So I can afford to declare wholehearted support for the revolutionary policies and cultural mores that have been altered top down by our elite ruling class. Sorry. You may not have heard this perspective before, so I'm going to lay it out in simple terms. Sodomy feels good, and you should try it. Feel good are always good, and there's no reason not to do things that feel good. There sure as hell isn't any reason to tell people not to do things that feel good, let alone prevent them from doing things that feel good, even if it gives them AIDS. Conformity is death. It's rigor mortis for your soul, and that's why I'm a nonconformist who fully supports every state-supported cultural change that has taken place in the last 30 years. I plan on continuing to push the envelope and fight in the safe space the ruling elites have formed for me within their global power structure. They don't stand a chance. Because guess what? I'm a 53-year-old white man, and I'm single, and I'm not a father. I'm living the dream, and when I die, I'll leave not a trace. Gone forever. Are you man enough to go extinct? Didn't think so, loser. Have fun fighting against your genocide, you fragile weaklings.
Wow, that is spot on. That's great, man. Wow. Good one. That's really funny.
Yeah, because Henry Rollins went from being a punk rocker to being a spoken word artist, and so I find that quite amusing. So,
oh, good grief, man! That's hilarious. Oh wow! All right, well we're at 2 hours plus. I need to use the bathroom. We haven't had any generous donations for a while. Please support the show, folks. logosmedia.com. Dr. Hans Utter, again, is hansutter.com. Please send him love and support as well for all the research and everything. And anyway, have a great evening and great week. And I guess the holidays are going to be up here in about 2 weeks, so we're going to have to figure out if we're going to be doing some sort of show during the Thanksgiving week or not. I don't know. I may get the heck out of town. But anyway.
Yeah, well, I thank everybody who's listening and people that listen later. I could say in some ways the content in this is a little more advanced because I'm bringing a lot of different things together, but it does make sense, even to Henry Rollins. I appreciate again the interest and this. What I am doing though, to a certain extent, is showing this stuff where it actually operates, as well as some of the theory behind it, why this stuff would be done, how it's deployed. And whether or not it's deployed, or you actually have people that are not just agents, they're zealots, right? They want this revolutionary thing, right? They are subscribed to this revolution, which the why I like that Henry Rollins thing, right? Of course, what's the revolution led us to? This totalitarian, far more oppressive revolutionary state than
it's way more oppressive in the name of freedom than it's ever been in my lifetime. And the CIA and SRI and all the rest would be proud, and all these libtards think that it's actual freedom, and they've been given no freedom at all. They don't grasp what freedom really is. They think that it's running around high and fucking buttholes, and excuse my French, and running down the street with your boobies out. That's what they think freedom is. They have no concept. But people apparently don't get what Pearl Jam really means. Pearl, white, jam. What is Pearl Jam, folks? They're mocking you. It's not jam like as in music. It's jam like as in jelly and jam. Pearl Jam. Think about it and you'll figure it out. And get that there's part of the same degeneracy as all the others. So anyway, that's a wrap for me. Anything else, Hans?
No, I'll just stay here and stare at my computer with the sound off if people just want to watch me stare.
Oh yeah, that's kind of cool. If you want to do that, I'll just leave it up. I'm gonna go take a leak, so I'm gonna get out.
No, I'm gonna go too, Jan. And so thanks a lot. Thanks everybody for listening. No, that's like an Andy Warhol. That's a John Cage piece. I'll just. All right, man. Good night. All right. All the best.